I want to welcome you on behalf of my fellow colloquio presenters to this nonprofit university collaborations. And today we want to spend a little time asking, how can we create healthy community-based partnership without causing nonprofit burnout? A topic that's near and dear to our hearts, and we're excited to share it with you today. And so I just want to give a quick overview of what our format's going to be, and then we'll dive in and get started. But we want to have some introductions. We already did some informally, but we might as well take a moment and find out who's in the room. And then I will give an overview, set up a little bit context. And then we have decided to break up into pairs. So our little panel is going to present as pairs. We have lead and co-lead. And what we'll do is we have 4 questions that we are guiding our conversation today. And as we begin, we'll introduce ourselves and we're going to pose the question and we're going to invite you to engage with us. So we're hoping that you will be close to your chat and that you will get in and give us your answers as well. And then we'll share with you a bit. We'll look at what's going on in the chat. And then of course, we're going to have time at the end once we're finished. We're nice and small, so we probably will get to a discussion here pretty quick, but we're really hoping that there can be a lot of dialogue and engagement today. So here's what we would love to know. I think right now we still have a fairly small crowd, so I might be willing to take a moment, since 4 of us are on the panel, to hear from you. What we're interested in knowing is just quickly, if you're coming from an academic viewpoint, practitioner viewpoint, or maybe both. Some of us wear both hats. And I'd love to know where you're zooming in from. I think it'd be fun to hear that. And then we're just like, why did you come to this session today? So if you don't mind, I hope not to embarrass you, I think I might call your name, if that's all right, and let you go, since it's easier that way. And I have Thomas as my first one on the list. Would you, Thomas, be willing to share with us a brief introduction?
Sure. Well, good afternoon. My name is Tom Breyer. I'm a professor in the School of Public Administration at the University of Central Florida, zooming in from Florida. I'm here. I have a position at the university now. This last academic year, the beginning of last academic year, we opened a new campus in downtown Orlando, UCF downtown. Part of the rationale of the new campus was to put public service and public serving oriented programs in the downtown core, closer to the government and nonprofit organizations that the programs serve. Since that time, I've been appointed as the director of a newly established Office of Downtown Community Engaged Scholarship. And so this is a big interest of mine practically from that perspective, but also in my research activity. I spend quite a bit of time looking at these kinds of partnerships and the creation of civically healthy communities through university community partnerships.
That's great. Welcome. Hopefully this will inform you today. Okay, so for those who just joined us, we're just quickly trying to find out if you're academic practitioner or both, where you're zooming in from and why you're here. Lauren, I think you're next.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Tomlinson. I'm a graduate student with Regis University in their Master's in Nonprofit Management program. I'm also, oops, I might have frozen.
No, you're great.
You can still hear me. Yep. Okay. I'm also the mobile distribution manager for St. Mary's Food Bank. And so I'm wearing a mask and a hat because I'm zooming in from Gallup, New Mexico. About 3 hours ago, we had turkey distribution in Window Rock, Arizona on the Navajo Nation, and gave out about 1,000 turkeys in about 2 hours.
Wow.
So it's been a very long day. But excited to do this. What interests me about this section is St. Mary's Food Bank. We work a lot with our university partners surrounding the state, and always interested to kind of work in and get ideas about those community-based partnerships.
That's great. Welcome. Okay, I think I have, is it Lisanne? If you can pronounce, excuse me if I mispronunciate.
No, that's fine. It's Lisanne. So I'm Lisanne Slayton. I'm calling from Lafayette, Louisiana, which is south central Louisiana, halfway between Houston and New Orleans on Interstate 10. So we've had our fair share of COVID and hurricanes this year. But nonetheless, we proceed on. And I am interested in this topic because we find from feedback from students that they really enjoy the service learning component when faculty add that to their courses. But we get tremendous resistance from faculty because it's too much work. There's too much paperwork. Where do I go? How do I do it? Just another layer of bureaucracy. The legal issues of sending students out to work with community-based organizations, and the logistics, et cetera, et cetera. So if there's a chance that I'll be, I'm currently serving as associate dean, but I likely will be on sabbatical in January, which means I need to spend some time figuring out what I'm going to do when I go back to teaching. And I would like to do more of this. Okay. So I thought this might springboard me into some good conversations and opportunities for further development.
Great. Thank you. Emily?
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm a graduate student. I'm also going to graduate in May. I'm zooming in from Indianapolis. I go to IUPUI. I think that this just sounds really interesting. I've done a lot of service learning as a student, and so I'm interested to see if my professors could be doing it more effectively, or if there are ways that as a student I can be better, like do better in my service learning. So yeah.
It's great. Welcome. Okay, then I don't see names here. I see, is it Pierre? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing correctly. Could you just give us a brief introduction?
Yes, Pierre Rogers.
Great.
Yes.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am in Chicago. I'm the director of the Axelson Center for Nonprofit Management at North Park University. And I was drawn to this, actually, Monica Hudson invited me. I'm working on a book chapter on applied nonprofit management and just looking at different approaches. And I had reached out to Monica. I've known her for many, many years through Arnova. And actually, she's joining me in working on the chapter and told me about this conversation. And I'm just all ears.
Great.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, Carol.
Hi, I'm the director of the Institute of Nonprofit Management Studies at University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. We are a rural campus, one of 15 in the Wisconsin system. We're close to Madison and close to Milwaukee, and we work quite closely with the Helen Bader Institute in Milwaukee. But I'm really interested in this because part of our education component in both our emphasis and our nonprofit minor involves internships, and we work quite closely with community-based organizations, and I want to hear other people's experiences, so I'm really looking forward to this session.
That's great. Okay, I have I think one more, and then I'm going to move us on. Is Elizabeth here?
Yes, hello. I'm Elizabeth Dale. I'm an assistant professor at Seattle University. And I teach a community engaged course and have done so for the past 8 years. And I'm really interested in critical approaches to service learning. So it looked like that might be some of what will be discussed today. So thanks so much for having me.
Welcome, welcome. So I hope I haven't missed anybody. If so, they can speak up now. Okay, I'm going to dive us in and get us going. So, as we kind of hear, it's exciting. It really helped to give me context today to hear all of you. You know, many university faculty, of course, are relying on nonprofit collaborations to provide experiential learning or service learning for their students, especially in nonprofit management. So, indeed, we know community-based learning has been shown to be highly effective, produces meaningful learning outcomes. And one of the features, though, that distinguish service learning from volunteerism, internships, or other community-based learning partnerships is that both parties contribute and benefit from the process. The learning relationship is rooted in a bi-directional partnership in which community organizations are not simply recipients of service, they become partners. The community organizations benefit from the academic expertise of students, faculty, and universities while providing a realistic work-based learning environment for learners and institutions. Thus, we know service learning programs should be providing an equal benefit to the nonprofit and the students, as well as ensure equal focus on the service provided and the learning taking place. But we have a concern. As you can imagine, to have a truly bi-directional relationship, it takes a fair amount of time from all parties involved, which some of you touched on today. And with increasing numbers of students being placed into these real-world partnerships, are we providing the nonprofits with sufficient benefits, or are we simply asking too much of them? In fact, some nonprofit leaders are getting burned out by these initiatives as they find them time-consuming, poorly coordinated, not always helpful, and often a stress on nonprofit resources. As stated on the slide here, the irony is that in our effort to help understaffed and under-resourced nonprofits, we may be making matters worse by also expecting nonprofit leaders to serve as unpaid professors and working with our students. This raises some important questions for us as nonprofit management educators and practitioners. Is the strain on the sector worth it? What is our responsibility to ensure an equitable exchange between our students and nonprofit partners? And so these are going to be the questions that are going to guide us today. What does a healthy relationship between the nonprofit sector and academic institutions look like? What works and what are the ongoing challenges? How might cross-discipline and cross-sector collaborations shape partnerships? And what resources are necessary to support such a program? And how do we get access to them? So we would like to, in our pairs, as I explained at the beginning, we're going to ask you to participate by, let me see if I can get this to work here, our first question. And we invite you to write your answer in the chat. What does a healthy relationship between the nonprofit sector and academic institution look like? And I'm now going to turn it over to Monica and Yvonne to get us started.
Hi, everyone. My name is Monica Hudson. I'm an associate professor at the University of San Francisco, and I also direct our Gellert Family Business Resource Center. I am speaking to you from Cali, Colombia, and I have my camera on and off primarily because I have a bad router. So if I bounce off, I'll be joining you as quickly as I can with a connection. So we're talking about this whole notion of a healthy relationship between the not-for-profit sector and academic institutions. And one of the things that I've been talking with my fellow symposium panelists about is I actually don't think it's a bi-directional relationship. I actually think it is a tripartite relationship. And if I can share my screen, the model that I try and use for that conversation is one that was developed by McCarthy, Prince McCarthy in 2004. And it touches on something that I believe all of us are going to be touching on today. And that is this whole notion of the relationship between the students, the faculty, and the agencies. And when McCarthy talks about her concept of triangles, as she calls it, you'll notice that there's double-headed arrows because she wanted to really help us think about the fact that the agencies are bringing experience and they're bringing field knowledge. The students are coming to it with a desire to learn, and one of the ways we know that we're achieving our goals is if they engage in critical reflection. So I was really glad to hear someone mention that as part of what's going to be things that we're talking about today. And then faculty, while we bring a certain set of content knowledge, many of us, because we're not practicing day to day, don't necessarily have the experiential knowledge. And so this whole notion of talking about the connections between the concepts, the partners, and the relationships, and the fact that these relationships have to be equal, that they work in both directions, not just one direction. And that there is a mutuality that's assumed when you're talking about an equilateral triangle that needs to be developed and maintained. So I want to hold right here because I know that Yvonne is going to be talking about some factors as well. Plus, we want to understand what it is you're saying about what allows for a successful relationship.
Thank you, Monica. And I'm Yvonne Kafik-Harrison, and I'm faculty at the University of Buffalo in the School of Social Work, also affiliated faculty in the School of Public Administration at the University of Victoria. And that's where I did my doctoral work, and service learning and community-based learning, community-based scholarship was part of the culture of the University of Victoria, the way it educated. And so I was steeped in that. And I have 3 degrees from the University of Victoria. And so it's really part of how I learned as a student. And I think that's one of the differences, as many faculty were never really immersed in academic service learning themselves as students. And so that's a little bit foreign to them. But before I kind of show a list, I want to go into the chat, because we believe that this was a really engaged learning kind of forum. So there's some questions that came up here. Monica put in the question about the healthy relationship, and Lauren talked about a commitment that helps students learn and benefits the organization. Ideally projects that are dream projects that nonprofits don't have time to do with their many hats. Thomas commented that it's integrative with equal leveraging of unique resources to help both advance or pursue their missions. And Elizabeth, like Lauren, talked about shared commitment and understanding of what both partners will provide. And Emily said she thinks it's the part that makes it healthy is the organization is also receiving a benefit instead of, you know, this unpaid professor. And Pierre says, another dynamic is whether the organization has a role in seeking the relationship with the university rather than just responding when faculty are looking for a project for students. And yeah, so I think all of those kind of point to what Monica was showing about those relationships. Monica, do you want to respond to any of this?
I think it's all part of the spirit of what it is we're all kind of talking about. I just wanted to throw up, since most of us are academics, throw up the theorist here. There's a 4-factor framework that I'm hopefully showing Sandy and Holland and Shabali talked about. You know, this intentional relationship building, the reciprocity, the understanding that all sides are both giving and getting, which is one of the reasons why my university stopped calling it service learning, because they found students were too invested in the volunteerism and charity and not understanding what they were getting. This notion of collaboration that both the partner and we are instructing, and the students may be instructing as well, and this notion of caring and democracy as a guiding principle. And I just want to add this little blue thing I put here, that one way to actually talk about implementing this 4-factor framework within a research context is this notion of using participatory action research, which I know many of us are familiar with, because that methodology inherently requires some collaboration and humility in order to really be effective.
Great. So those are some of those frameworks. I'm wondering, yes, if you can, so here's my, here's what does it look like. Now I've come from where Elizabeth is, Seattle University, which academic service learning is directly tied to the mission of that university. And as a Jesuit institution that situates itself in urban areas in need of the knowledge and resources that the university has. So it's a direct impact not only on its ethos, but how it does business, and have moved from there to a Research One institution where reciprocity and sharing knowledge and resources with the community was also the way that it does business. So I've kind of summed up, and then I've moved back to Canada and engaged in the same engaged learning as a director of a nonprofit and voluntary sector studies program, and have experienced many of the different challenges that you spoke of, that Reagan spoke of around the community feeling that it's been extended in working with students or working with faculty who don't return much value. You can just stay on that one, Regan.
Yeah.
And on the flip side of that, really holding the university to such standards for engagement that it's stressing the faculty and the students. And so it flips from one extreme to another. And so if we go back now to this slide where some of what, you know, kind of characteristics of a healthy relationship, seeing these are some of the things that, and not just from my own experience, but there's a large literature on this, on, you know, when they're aligned with the university and integrated into the culture, when the university allocates funding to these initiatives, you know that it has value and it's not just stuck off on its own island in the university working itself. It's really part of that culture where it's integrated into a discipline. It has an academic home. And I love how NAC has provided some leadership around this. What would a accredited or a engaged program look like? All you have to do is look at the NAC standards to see that it would have dedicated faculty, it would be engaged in an academic home, and it would have support beyond the lone faculty member to make all this stuff happen. And I think that addresses some of the faculty burnout that Lizanne was mentioning and why it's so difficult to generate within higher education. It does return benefits to students and faculty. It enriches the discipline, it brings it to life, and enhances student success in so many ways. So that's on the university side. The community side, it aligns with clearly identified needs, has clear goals and priorities. And I'm drawing here from the work of Silka, who has studied this, to say that these initiatives are threatened when they don't have clear goals, when the priorities shift and so does the funding. And so these are some of the characteristics of what a healthy one would look like, that would be clear. You would understand what those priorities were. There would be a long-term view, particularly if we're dealing with wicked social problems that can't be solved overnight. There's some co-production of value and co-design and real trust in those relationships and adjustment, mutual adjustment as they go along. And of course, ultimately having some kind of impact on the community. So these are things that I have experienced, but they're also documented, well documented in the literature on what those characteristics look like. So I'll turn it over to Monica.
Actually, I'm going to turn it over to Ruth and our second question.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Great. I'm Ruth Bernstein. I am at the Pepperdine University along with Regan. And so I've posted the second question now into the chat, and Yvonne's going to get us started.
Right. So what I wanted to start with is this little scenario. So what works and what are the ongoing challenges? And both Ruth and I had a couple of discussions about this. And I thought I'd tell you a story about when I moved from Seattle University, where I first started engaging it as a faculty member, and I learned a lot along the way from my experiences. And so when I went to the University at Albany, I prepared a letter to boards, because I teach board governance, to boards in the University at Albany community. And I actually have this letter here. And the letter was really a call for participation in the upcoming governance class. And the letter specifies all of the things that I learned I needed to do if I was going to get this right. From what is it? What are the expectations? How much time is this going to involve? And when would it take place? So that boards could come to me and make an informed decision about participating in the class. And I had learned that that was a really important, than having students go and find a board or trying to get them at the last minute. So if we go to the next slide, I'm talking about this, the first characteristic, one of a recruitment letter to boards in the community. And that, what that did was yield probably 25 or 35 responses. That letter was widely circulated on a community board put out by the Chamber of Commerce. Those 25 probably yielded about 15 actual boards with many discussions in between about the commitment and seeking those boards' agreement to work with the students, then having the students and matching them up according to their interests, and then creating a little contract between the student and the board around the scope of the work, what the students would actually do and what the deliverables would be. Breaking up then to teach governance, which students have no background in, they're really going at this raw, breaking up those concepts of governance and the scope of the work that the students were going to do into smaller chunks, what David Feeney calls turning a whale into a series of dolphins and building their work over time, scaffolding those assignments, using methods like team-based learning to not only deliver in terms of the products, but to develop knowledge and skills throughout. And critical reflection is a key component of that. Creating safe spaces for students to acknowledge they don't know and to seek that out, and that in turn optimize their learning. And then within most of these challenges, if a student has a learning challenge, a learning disability, they often come out in these kind of experiences because they're real and they mean a lot to them. And I'm mostly talking about writing and writing in a synthesized real way for the real world. And so to integrate some of the university's supports around students who are challenged by this within that. So those are all some of the things that I've integrated, that I've learned from over the years and have served me well most of the time. So I'm going to turn it over to Ruth now.
Right, and the next slide. So I know Yvonne got a little bit excited there and talked about some of the issues that are listed on my slide. If you could go back.
I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries.
It's
It's the one right there. Yeah. So the challenges, some of which Yvonne, as I said, talked about, the learning disabilities, the writing skills. We have all in this space, and I expect that you came to this session because you're interested in this or have experienced this. I find the biggest issues are the lack of understanding of the time and the commitment on behalf of everybody involved. And that includes the faculty and not getting their administrators to understand the time commitment. It includes having the organization think, oh, this will be great and easy, and then finding they cannot support it. And the students who don't realize what we expect from them. And I have a student now who's turned in no work for the semester, so now I have to go to the partner and apologize and explain they're not qualifying for the grant at the end of the class. So it comes, I think you've all experienced this. I also worked with students with disabilities or students who just don't really care. But I find that's very rare if it's a nonprofit because they end up buying into the mission usually. And of course, the clients, same thing. They find the students aren't committed or the students don't have enough time and that they want more access to the academician because that's what they really want to see. And often the clients are not providing sufficient feedback or even the information that they had agreed to provide to the student to complete a project. So these are some of the points. I don't want to take more time because I think we've all seen these things. And so now it's time to turn it back over to, I think, Regan and myself.
Or do we want to look in the chat here, Ruth?
We do, but we're really tight on time, so I'm not sure if Regan wants, it's up to Regan.
I'll let you guys look at it real quick and then take it
Because
from
they're
there.
great comments, there's no question.
Anything you want to highlight there?
I'm just looking.
I like this comment from Thomas.
Yes.
I offer three
Yeah, so
packages.
a lot of the, okay, go ahead.
Offers 3 packages for expectation management. Bronze package for fully student-led faculty facilitated service learning projects with uncertain quality of output. Silver package for a nominal fee to pay 1 or 2 grad students with light supervision, or the gold package to hire faculty to do the applied work. Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
And Monica says that the ongoing challenges come when faculty and students think they already know what the community needs from their limited interaction, right? And that's a really important point. And that's why part of, you know, engaged courses that I work with, the students actually prepare the scope of the work with the partner. And their challenge is to scope it out in a way that that's reasonable and that they can actually complete it most often. And that's where I come in to work with them. Even the community partner may want them to do something that might take 2 or 3 projects actually to get to within the time period that we have. So, yeah, so I think that's important. And then someone else said, Carol said, collaboration is key to make sure that needs are identified and there's a good fit between the student and each organization. And that's really important too. And that takes time as well. And that it's an NPO driven process, but that the faculty make sure that it's integrated and connects to the curriculum in a way that can enhance that. This is where faculty come in and having, we're going to talk about resources later, but yes, these are all really important points because, as Emily said, it can lead to frustration of the partner and even anger. And again, I've seen that myself. And again, you know, it's a really careful relationship to navigate those kinds of challenges to make sure that they're resolved adequately and effectively. And again, being unprepared of students doesn't help, as Monica has mentioned. So I'll just stop there, Regan.
Thank you, you guys. And thanks for your patience. I have a funky mouse, so it moves my slides all over, but I'll do my best. I appreciate your patience. Okay, Ruth, I'm going to hand it off to you. And here's our next question. We want to encourage you to participate in the chat.
Okay. So this question is about cross-discipline and cross-sectoral collaborations and how different they are and how beneficial we have found them to be. So I will be describing some cross-discipline partnerships, and then Regan will take it to discuss the cross-sector collaborative relationships. So what I'm coming into is to say that I think we are typically thinking about nonprofit students working for nonprofits. And I have recently come to Pepperdine from the University of Washington and Tacoma, and there as well as here, we have had large programs where we use business students in particular, but students from all majors who want to participate with nonprofits. The benefit to this is that we're bringing in new sets of skills beyond just the nonprofit student to the nonprofit organization. And we're opening the eyes to these business majors in particular, but the others as well, that you can go get a job with a nonprofit. You don't have to be in the business sector with your business skills. And even if you don't want to get a job in the nonprofit sector, this will make you a skilled community member and board member as you grow into your adulthood. So the 3 areas I'd like to really comment on is a board governance class, University of Washington, where we would use, and this was in the chat, what do you do in 1 semester? We made this a 2-semester course with different credits each semester so that the students got to sit on boards and over a 6-month period instead of over just the 10-week period. And then in the course of the first quarter, they, with the organization, developed the project. What I think was missing, that is not missing in the next piece, is the MOU. And the next explanation is the service learning course that we have here at Pepperdine, which really Regan should be speaking about and get credit for. But it is, again, it's required of all business majors and minors as part of their capstone. And the students come from these cross disciplines, even within the business fields. And they work very closely with the nonprofit organizations to create an MOU. And in that MOU, they determine what the project's going to be and what those deliverables will be, so that it's a collaborative process to get them both to understand what they're going to give and what they're going to get. And I think that becomes key to the success of these projects. The third thing is that when we've done internships, to make sure that students across the university realize that they can come to us as faculty sponsors of these internships, so that they get exposed. An example of that would be people who are studying healthcare leadership but might want to do an internship in a nonprofit who delivers health services. So, or museum studies, students working in a museum. So these are ways that you can incorporate people across the disciplines. How do you keep the nonprofit from burning out? Well, I think it's because we're bringing a different set of skills, and that they then can work with the students to determine what are the skills of the students and what their needs are. So let me give you 2 examples of how nonprofit organizations have incorporated our programs into their strategic planning. The first is a very small nonprofit, and what she has done is the executive director has convinced her board that as part of their strategic plan, they will participate in one of these service learning courses in the fall, and in the spring, they incorporate the recommendation the students gave them, the strategies for their, whatever the issue is they had outlined in the MOU. And a second example is a set of students who go do research for an organization, and in that process are doing program evaluations and applying all kinds of research methodology at the same time. But by doing that year over year or every couple of years, the organization has a set of data that tracks over many, many years. So it's beneficial to them. And I will stop there because I'm sure we're running out of time.
Thank you, Ruth. I do want to encourage you guys to look at the chat, though. There's some interesting comments in there. Thomas has given us some things there. I'm going to look at that article on multi-sector trilemma or something like that. I'm going to look that up. But also Lauren's talking about some practical things that are happening. So I'm going to share briefly. I'm Regan Schaefer. I direct the Nonprofit Leadership Collaborative at Pepperdine University. I'm a professor of management in the undergraduate business school, and I teach the capstone on servant leadership, where students do consulting with nonprofits. And I've been doing this for quite a while. And I think that I'm hoping, I'd like to kind of illustrate with a story as well, because I think it's going to show some of the principles that we've all been talking about along the way. And I want to talk about a cross-sector partnership that recently happened. So when COVID hit, I have all these community partners I've been building for years. For about 20 years, I've been investing in these dynamics and relationships. And it's a true commitment and friendship, frankly, and collaboration and partnership. That language speaks to me. So COVID hits, and a group of us from across sectors, so university folks, nonprofit leaders, small business, government, we convened to discuss the impact on our sector immediately. And what we did is we brainstormed a list of people we knew. So we started drawing from, like, who do we know on different boards who represents different business groups, or who do we know represents different groups in the community? Who needs to be at the table, and invited them to just gather. We just put out a call for a Zoom meeting. But I want to give a little background on this. It's important to note that these were folks we had previous relationships with, and you're going to see this theme coming back. 2 years ago, we had a mass shooting at a dance club called Borderline, and it ravaged our community. and our campus in particular, because we had 19 students there that night, and one of our students was killed. The very next day, a massive wildfire came through and impacted our campus and community greatly, plus a majority of this area where my nonprofit partners are. And so what happened is a couple of weeks later, when we could finally come out and convene, we all came together to discuss what needed to do next. And we quickly identified one of the greatest needs was our nonprofit partners who were receiving all of this care, especially after the shooting. On the receiving end, they had significant mental health and emotional needs. That was the immediate identification. And they also were just suffering from it, overwhelmed, they themselves working with this. And so I thought, okay, this is we've got to find a way to help here. And while Pepperdine was reeling itself, we also knew we had a chaplain's office full of people who were trained. We had a graduate school that had trained counselors, and we said, it's time to get them and mobilize them. How can we connect them with these nonprofits and provide resources to them? So when COVID hit, we did the same thing, and we started with a small group. I think only 8 to 10 of us showed up for that first call. But once again, across sectors, for us, what was interesting tied to this burnout was how our nonprofit people, the staff, the people who were boots on the ground were suffering. And in particular, they talked about like suddenly having to go remote, not having the tech support, suddenly having their children home with them, and having to figure out how to do homeschooling. And so consequently, it was the impact to us and our programs where nonprofits were starting to say, I can't finish out the semester with your students. I don't have the time and bandwidth to do this. I'm overwhelmed. So what we did is we thought, okay, we're going to start assigning people to come and give reports. So the very next week, we kind of doubled our numbers. We invited people to come and give reports on what was happening, where they were. And we started assigning duties. And so in my case, I coordinate skill-based volunteers based upon these needs. I was hearing my nonprofits call out, and I thought, we have a bunch of staff who suddenly don't have work to do, frankly, because the students have left. And so I contacted our HR office, and they said, we will pay them to go and volunteer. We would love for them to be using their time to do skill-based volunteer if they can't work for us. And so what we did is we put out the call to our alum, our faculty, our students, to all kinds of folks, and sent out, I think, 120 volunteers pretty quickly. So examples included tech support and training, social marketing, content creation and implementation, translator, strategic planning to work with the board, training on how to apply for PPP loans, data analytics, spiritual and emotional support. And then tutoring of kids who were suddenly now being schooled at home. And we committed to 6 months of this. And so what I want to say here is, and then our group still meets, but now we're bi-weekly, and we actually, we're counting the other day, we've offered over 123 workshops in that time, seminars, trainings, you know, it could be as small as what we have now to large, 100, 200 people. And we gave ourselves the name, the Capacity Building Resource Group. So, so what I want to say here, though, is this is where I think it's really important to hear that when the nonprofit has need, we want to be there. Because also, I will say, so many of my nonprofit partners who suddenly didn't have the bandwidth before, we got them through the summer, and this fall they're back. But also we had to redesign the way we do things because we're now remote. And so I suddenly had to ask different questions, and we had to reframe how we do our courses and how much time we were really asking of our nonprofit partners. We have to be sensitive to the needs and listen, listen, listen. But also I think this relationship, it goes deep and it's long-term. And I feel that when we come through this, that we have readjusted, we've restructured, but we've also just solidified that relationship even more through that process. And my hope is, I think we're all burned out, to be honest with you at this point, but I'm thinking that it's not quite as bad because we kind of are trying to work with each other in the crisis that we're in this moment. So I share that with you as kind of an example of what we've done on our end. Well, I'm gonna move on because I'm really aware of the time. Yes, so the need for flexibility and listening. Yes, 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 yes. So we're gonna finish up with question 4 here, and then we'll open the floor for some questions here. So what resources are necessary? So Monica and I are going to touch base on this, and I'll just talk about a few. I realize we've talked about a lot of this already, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. I will make this really quick. But for me, I think that resources are critical because they help avoid the burnout, because they help focus you. And you'll kind of hear how I frame these. So I move mine into academic, nonprofit, and financial. So just from the academic part, institutional support is key. You've already heard that. But sometimes you have to go do the hard work first, and then the support will follow. So I have found that's kind of the way I've done most everything here. And yet finally, after 20 years, I finally got funding to have a colleague who teaches nonprofit management for the first time with Ruth. Woohoo! So, but you know, looking at, so from an academic standpoint, I had to be aware I'm going to need to prove myself. Curricular guidelines, I need to look to those. So NAC was huge, Nonprofit Leadership Alliance, and of course Arnova, significant. I think the other part is training, what we've already talked about for the faculty, for the nonprofit partners. It's really important that my faculty understand what is community-based research, what is service learning, but also my nonprofits understand service learning is required and different than volunteers or interns who are coming to work with you. And the other part is assessment data. I have lots and lots of data on students from the faculty, from the nonprofit partners. I encourage you to think about, you know, how do you set this up? And I have years and years of good old pre-post assessments, internal, external reviews, student feedback that have helped me later then to build my case. Also turns into interesting scholarship, but I will say we've learned a lot. We've adjusted and changed, but I was able to take that to my university and use it to advocate. Rank, tenure, and promotion recognition is something that is a resource you need. You need to know that faculty will be rewarded. So that means sometimes educating that committee. I personally do not put any of the work that I do under service. It is all scholarship or teaching and trying to help faculty to know how to frame and use that. And then I think, as you see, nonprofit partners are a resource for you. And you need to be cultivating those, just like we have through the years, and maintaining that relationship. For nonprofit resources, we touched on this some, but engaged contact person who really wants to work with faculty and students, but is also knowledgeable. On the nonprofit side, they need to have some time to give to what it's going to take. They need to have organizational buy-in. They need to have accessibility, especially if we're doing remote learning. They need to have a clear need that fits with the service we can provide. So they have to work together there. But the financial resources are a piece that is a great blessing. And I find if it's in the academic side, you can get more financial resources because it's part of the curriculum. They need to support that. So for most of my career, I ran without no financial support, but through that, I've done grant funding to do course releases for faculty, curriculum design, funding for an orientation, and now we co-host every year, it's been for 12 years, an annual conference with our nonprofit partners and our students, and bring in people that are well-known, like Beth Cantor, Kim Klein, but also local networks. And that is really a retreat atmosphere. It's a time to celebrate our friendships. It's time to honor it. So that is a way that we have kind of managed resources. And now I find people expect that conference to happen and the funding follows to make that happen. Okay, I want to pass over to Monica in case she didn't hear what she has to share with us.
I think you've really covered it, Regan. The thing I want to emphasize though is this whole notion of money. With the training, which is so critical as a part of really kind of breaking folks out of the charity mode, giving our not-for-profits a stipend, giving faculty a stipend for actually participating in this kind of training is really helpful in getting people to do the activities that we know community engaged learning involves. So I know that my internet is kind of unstable. I'd love to kind of look at examples that others have put in the chat and kind of bring that into the conversation. So I'm seeing university leadership, Thomas mentioned, for taking the risk of doing this, tenure and promotion alignment in connection with other comments that you could go ahead and put in our chat that would allow us to really kind of look at, okay, what are the resources that allow for an effective set of partnerships?
Monica, I wonder if you could share what you said about the program you have where you bring the partners to the university and you provide the funding for that to build this community and knowledge and whatnot, because I was really interested in that and how you did that.
Sure. We have a program that is both for instructors and for community partners. It's a 4-week program where they are given materials to look at, not just written materials, but webinars, etc., to try and build knowledge, but also build a community. It gives them an opportunity, kind of a two-way street. And during one of those sessions, faculty actually comes in to talk with them and hear from them, very similar to the questions that we've raised today about challenges, problems. So it really becomes a two-way educational process. The same thing happens on the faculty side. So the faculty go through a training program, and during one of those sessions, the community partners come in and they get a chance to hear that way. So it really is wonderful in terms of building a cohort of partners and faculty who are really committed to being engaged in this work. And the resources for that come from an annual gala that is done through our Leo McCarthy Center for Public Good to really support this effort on an ongoing basis.
That's great. I want to open the floor for any questions or comments. We have a few minutes left, and we realize we've done a lot of talking, but if anyone has any questions about anything we've shared today or wants to add to the comment, we invite you to unmute and engage with us. We'd welcome it.
I think it was mentioned in the chat and kind of briefly under that question too of the challenges for partnership or for nonprofits and things is sometimes at universities and students, right, they come in with the expectation of, oh, this is what needs to happen, right? Before you know that. I know on the food bank, I get that all the time of students will say, okay, I'm gonna do a program. I'm gonna create a menu, a recipe book for your clients. I probably have 1,000 different recipe books that various different students have made over the years that I've been working at the food bank, not realizing, and then we would tell them, but they don't get the same menu every time. And it's that the lack of understanding, and I think Monica, you brought a good point of having that understanding of what we do initially to alleviate it, as well as when we talked to the professor and I've been like, this is not going to work, right? And they were like, just let them continue because it's for their grade, right? And so, and not willing to do that constructive feedback has been almost to the point where for a while we said, you know, no more undergraduates. Like we would work with the graduate students up and up until into the future, just because we've had that all the time.
Well, I think if I can respond to that, it comes back to setting those expectations and allowing the students and the organization to work together to develop what the deliverables and what the project will be. And so that's a learning opportunity for both sides to say, what is it we need? What is a reasonable expectation? Of course, as a faculty, we weigh in and say, no, come on, you can't do that. That's too much. Or go back and do something else. You know, we put our 2 cents into it, but we're allowing it to really be directed by the nonprofits much more than the students, because the students usually say, I don't know. So it does come from the nonprofit. But I think
I'd like to hear,
go on.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about some challenges. Forgive me, my internet connection is unstable too. I think about universities where there's an expectation that faculty do whatever it is without additional support.
Absolutely.
So you were talking about the list of resources that are helpful, but if that's not available, but the faculty is committed to still providing that kind of experience for students, just trying to come up with some alternative strategies. And I have found myself in a position where I've not been able to get funding outside because the expectation is that the university is supposed to provide the funding. But the university expects that the outside funders are available to do that. So we're kind of cut betwixt and between.
Yeah, that's a really big, important question. And, you know, NAC requires that to be engaged. There is that integration. So my approach has been to scale back, and this is the longer term approach. What piece of something in a need can we look at and help the students scope that out in a way that's completely manageable for the students, for the faculty and the community partner, and then to build on that into the next course and have a body of knowledge be transferred and developed over time. And that's really interesting for students because they're making a contribution, for faculty because they're seeing knowledge develop. And when that happens in a systematic way, I think you're better able to decide what is the next step for everyone. It becomes quite apparent. It's quite messy early on. So I kind of like that approach and found that you know, it's manageable. And then I say to partners, if you want, this is the slow moving ship version of what you want. If you want it right away, you're going to need to go to a research center and you're going to have to pay for it. But if you want it this way, here's how we could do that. And we can become long-term partners and be more knowledgeable about what the needs are, all of us.
I was also going to say there's a lot of resources that are available, though, even online, you know, service learning resource centers and through your different partnerships. And I find that those are helpful to kind of get some tools in place. And, you know, like Yvonne, I kind of started small and scaled as I developed, but I like the small wins too. Do a few things well and learn how to do those well, establish relationships, you know, focus on building a small cadre of partners that you can collaborate with and learn together and make mistakes together and work that out. I do think that is the #1 challenge in some ways. And yet it's hard because it breaks my heart because I want people to not give up because of the funding piece. And yet I know that for me, it took years of kind of building. And then I think the fruit started to communicate to the mission of the university. And I think that's the other part, is always coming back to them about how I fit with the strategic plan, I fit with the mission. I mean, I was always selling the program and what we were doing along the way. And I think that helped somewhat now, or it helped extremely, I shouldn't say somewhat, it helped extremely to kind of make that point.
Regan, before we close out, I wanted to pull on a comment from the chat that Elizabeth made about this delineation between project-based and placement-based service learning. I was wondering if Liz would say a little bit more about that.
I just think it's helpful to think about expectations. Project-based tends to be much more customizable, I think, with the organization and the student, or the class and the group of students. And placement-based is sort of an ongoing program where we do have organizations that have sort of like ready to go volunteer ready to go opportunities for students to kind of jump into with maybe a minimal amount of like orientation or background. So maybe, 30 minutes or an hour of orientation. And so my experience has been that the placement-based can work really well. We're also on the quarter system, so it's 10 weeks. Mm-hmm. So the placement-based can work pretty well for undergraduates, kind of gives them a taste. But the roles are already kind of preset and they just pick from what's available. And then placement-based is something that I tend to use more with graduate students.
Helpful. That's helpful. Well, my friends, our time has quickly come to an end, and I want to thank all of the panelists for sharing your knowledge and time with us today. I also thank all of you who participated in the chat and who stayed with us on a Friday afternoon, evening to see us through to the end. It's just, we want to encourage you in your good work. I would also say all of us welcome you reaching out to us if we can help share resources or tools or curriculum anytime. And so I hope that you have our information. You can get a hold of us through our Nova. But I just want to extend that. To me, I love the service learning community-based nonprofit community because we all share and it's, you know, we help each other. And I think that spirit is so sincere. And so I just want to extend that. I know we all would be offering that to you. And this has been recorded. It will be posted on the Our Nova site. And we just wish you the very, very best as you pursue your efforts to build nonprofit and university partnerships. So thank you.